right, so today we're going to talk about plants and animal cells. So, what is a cell? So, all plants and animals are made of cells. So, humans are animals too. So, keep in mind that this is true even in your own body. But cells are sometimes called the building blocks of life. They are the basic unit of all living things. They're so small that you need a microscope to see them. And each cell has a different set of functions. So if you think about your own body, the smallest unit of your heart would be the cell, but those cells are different from the cells that are in your liver. And those cells are different than the cells that are in your pancreas. So each cell has a different set of functions, but the cells all have some very common similarities and they're set up the same. So within a cell, there are multiple what we call organelles, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there are specific things that happen within a cell. All right. So there are two basic types of cells. So we have animal cells and plant cells. So they are similar, but they are not exactly the same. So all living things have cells, and it's one of the two. All right, so within a cell, there are smaller parts called organelles. They are part of the cell that help it function. They do specific jobs inside the cell. So we call them organelles. Just like when we are talking about your organs of your body, those are the smaller parts that help your body function. The organelles are like mini organs of the cell. So it's like the organs of the cell. So each thing has a specific function. So within the cell, we call them organelles. All right, the first one we're going to talk about is the cell membrane. Plant and animal cells are surrounded by a cell membrane. The cell membrane is a thin layer that separates the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell. It protects the cells and controls what comes in, such as food, and what goes out, such as waste. So both plant and animal cells have a cell membrane along the outside. They also have a cell wall. So only the plants actually have a cell wall. So excuse me there. So plants have a cell wall. Animal cells do not have a cell wall. And this is outside of the cell membrane. So plant cells have an extra layer that surrounds the cell membrane called the cell wall. The cell wall is stronger than a membrane. The cell wall gives structure and support to a plant cell. So animal cells do not have those. I'm sorry. They do not have those. They have a cell membrane. All right, so all cells, plant and animal cells, have a cytoplasm. And this is where the organelles of the cell are held. So it's kind of the inside guts of the cell. It is a jelly-like fluid inside the cell in which the organelles are found. It is usually colorless and about 80% water. All cells also have a nucleus, so both plant and animal cells have a nucleus. The nucleus is the control center of the cell. It contains the DNA, or the genetic material, which controls the activities within each cell. So you can see in the diagram, both plant and animal cells have a nucleus, and the DNA determines what type of cell it's going to be. So the DNA will tell that cell what its function is, whether it's a heart cell or it's a liver cell. So it'll tell that cell what to do. They also, all cells, both plant and animal cells, have what are called vacuoles. Vacuoles are storage tanks that the cell uses that holds water and other materials. So a plant cell usually has one large vacuole. Vacuoles are often the largest organelle in a plant cell. When plants do not get enough water, their vacuoles shrink and the plants begin to droop. An animal cell has several smaller vacuoles, so it has them, but we call them vesicles because they are smaller, so it's like mini vacuoles, so we call them vesicles, but it holds the water and other materials that the cell needs. Okay, we also have the mitochondria. So within both a plant and an animal cell, we have mitochondria, and that's the powerhouse of the cell. It takes nutrients in, breaks them down to produce energy for the cell in a process called cellular respiration. So this takes typically sugars is the nutrient that it's taking in, and it will break them down and produce energy for that cell. Cells also have what are called ribosomes. So both plant and animal cells have ribosomes. Ribosomes are tiny, like balls. They're shaped in a ball figure. They make things that the cell needs, like proteins. This process of making protein is called protein synthesis. The cells can use the proteins made by the ribosomes to build new structures, repair damage, and direct chemical reactions. Okay, both plant and animal cells also have what's known as the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum is a transportation network that takes molecules where they need to go. It helps transport the proteins made by the ribosomes to the Golgi Apparatus. And I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. But so think of the endoplasmic reticulum as sort of the highway of the cell. It's where things are transported back and forth to different organelles. So now let's talk about the Golgi apparatus, also known as the Golgi complex. It's composed of stacks of thin sacs that can be thought of as the post office of the cell. It sorts and processes proteins and then determines which proteins need to be transported out of the cell. So the Golgi apparatus then transports those proteins on the endoplasmic reticulum, or the highway of the cell. Chloroplasts are only in plant cells. So a chloroplast contains what's called chlorophyll that allows photosynthesis to take place. So as you know, animals do not get their energy through photosynthesis, only plants. So plant cells have a specific bonus feature that is called a chloroplast, and it allows photosynthesis to take place. So the chloroplast contains chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs energy from sunlight and creates sugar to feed the plant. So bonus for our plants, they get chloroplast so they can store the chlorophyll to get energy from the sun. It'd be pretty cool if animal cells had chloroplast, then we could just get our energy from laying in the sun. But as animals, we cannot. Okay, so the main differences between plant and animal cells. So if you can kind of look at the diagrams there, you can see that plant cells have a cell wall, which gives it bonus extra support there. And it's outside of this yellow layer, which is the cell membrane. So plant cells have a bonus layer, this blue layer, the cell wall. They also have chloroplasts, which contain the chlorophyll to produce, to go through photosynthesis to produce energy from the sun. Plant cells are typically rectangular in shape, and because they have that cell wall to kind of keep their shape intact, they're typically fixed in that shape. And they typically have just one big vacuole, so one big storage tank there. So then on the other side, the flip side, animal cells do not have that external cell wall. They also don't have chloroplasts, so we can't get energy from the sun. but they are typically round and kind of an irregular shape. So you might have, if once we get to look at the microscopes, if we're able to look at some animal cells, you'll notice that pertaining to whatever organ those animal cells came from, they have different shapes. So if you think of a nerve cell, it's got spiky things all over it versus a cell that might be in your heart. So different irregular shapes. And we do not just have one big vacuole like plant cells have. We have smaller vacuoles or smaller storage tanks, and we call those vesicles.